how's everybody doing tonight? Good. Well, we've got a Thursday drive look, and then there's an extra one in there you can do on your own, on your free time on the weekend, stay up all night Saturday night and do on the ESUS. It's actually a pretty cool one. It's newer than the one we'll be doing drive look. We'll look at it Thursday and play around with it. So, winding down, week 13. Just a few more weeks till we have presentations, right? Ouch. Hello. All right, so next week we have, let's see, we're here Tuesday. We're not here Thursday, right, for Thanksgiving. Correcto Mundo? Yep. Following week is week 14. Or no, week 14. Is that right? Yeah, week 14. Am I missing a week here? 12. 19. What's the next date on that? Missing a week in there. Thought we had another week in there. Should have 16 weeks. Let me pull up here real quick. All right, so we're on the 13th now. I'm missing the 20. Yep, missing that week. So I'm trying to give you guys a 1 week less to work on your stuff. Yeah, exactly. I will change that. So you do have an extra week there. So disregard that. All right, you have an extra week. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, 11/19. If you look on the overhead, it said the first week of presentations 11/19. Wrong. First week of presentations is going to be the week of 11/26, not 11/19. So I will change that. All right. So you got a couple more weeks before you freak out. All right.
I'm trying to plan my overnighter there.
Yeah, exactly.
Writing the paper and the presentation all in one evening.
Exactly. So I will change that. All right. And again, on Thursday, the lab for drive look. What we might do, since we have next week, that's not on the calendar, is we might do the ESUS one next week. Play with that one. We might do that. That's actually a good idea. We'll do that. All right. So let's go over the security policies on chapter 14. Go back one. Let's do the download. Okay, I've got Windows 8 running on my iPad mini. You guys will have to come and play with it before you leave.
Quick question.
Yeah, a mini. My wife, actually, I asked for one for Christmas, right? But she noticed they were running out pretty quick everywhere. So she actually got me one over the weekend and said, "Do you want to wait till Christmas or get it now?" I go, "What do you think?"
There's still going to be a gift under the tree then.
So here it is, and so you'll have to come up and play with it. I really like it. And
How realistic is it to do development on the iPad?
you know what? What's crazy? I've actually done Windows development on this already. I've actually remoted in, because I'm remoting into my Windows 8 machine, by the way, at work, or my day job, where I do Windows programming. This is on the machine that has my Visual Studio platform. And the reason I put 8 on it was, I have 8 on my laptop, you guys knew that, right? But it was so slow to remote into a parallel environment, because Parallels is already virtual. And so I was basically remoting into a virtual environment, which made it really that much slower. And so anyway, I've noticed quite a bit difference remoting in to native Windows 8 install on a machine. Because on the iPad, the app I'm using is called Splashtop Win 8, which was about $5, the app was. And basically it lets you virtually remote in. Yeah, I showed you that last week, and I've got that on the Mini too. But as far as performance, tons better having it on a native Windows 8 machine. So
it seems everything's going tablet. I mean, for as far as portability and stuff, but typing and stuff, that just.
Oh yeah, well, you want an external keyboard. If you do a lot of typing, which I don't do a lot of typing, but the times I do type papers or whatever, I just fire my Bluetooth keyboard.
I mean, for like development-wise of coding and stuff like that.
Bluetooth keyboard.
Bluetooth keyboard.
Oh yeah, Bluetooth keyboard. Yeah, definitely.
So you carry a keyboard around with you.
Yeah, and a little keyboard. Yeah, even have portable ones like that you roll up. They have rubber ones. You can roll up and take with you if you want, which I don't like.
I have one of the roll-up
laser keyboards.
Laser
Yeah.
keyboards.
but
Bluetooth?
It has a plug-in.
Yeah, they have Bluetooth ones. So it's like $30. You can get $30. The one I'm actually going to get is from Other World Computing. It's out of Harvard. It's a Mac business. They just do Mac products only. Actually, they ship worldwide. OWC is the name of it. You might have seen it on the web. Anyway, they have a Bluetooth, a black Bluetooth keyboard with a normal size keyboard for like $30. I'm going to get that.
Okay, so but most of the development that you do anyway,
Right.
you're not actually doing it physically, well, not physically, on the iPad. You're remoting into somewhere else and using it as a gateway to do development on another PC.
Right, yeah. So I'm remoting in using the iPad to, like, the only time I actually develop on my iPad remoting in is when I'm in long meetings where I have nothing to do. I'm remoting in then and programming versus sitting there doing nothing, going to sleep. And so I use it then. I use it when maybe I have an idea at night in between classes on a program. I'll fire it up and play with it then. And so it's not like it's not a productivity environment.
Not a
No, it's definitely not a replacement, but you can actually develop on the fly. Yeah, not yet anyway. So anyway, so yeah, I'll have you guys come up and play with it. Pretty impressed with the Mini, and price point's pretty good. I got the 16 gig. I wouldn't recommend getting anything but the 16 gig because everything you buy now or everything you save now on a drive is all virtual or on the cloud, and so I've never seen a need ever for anything beyond a 16 gig device because all I literally load on my iPads have always been just apps, not data. Everything data-wise is on Dropbox, and so I never watch movies on my iPad. That's stupid. I mean, I know people that do, but if I do watch a movie, it's usually through Netflix, which doesn't take up any space, or yeah, exactly, or stuff like that. So I don't really see a need for, even though you can get a 32 and 64 gig device, I wouldn't recommend for students ever getting anything beyond a 16 gig. Because all your music and everything you can actually stream now as well from your home unit. So let's talk about plans and policies. I did, by the way, look at your procedural steps or changes for our network. I'm putting together a document, actually still tweaking it to give to Diane and IT on your guys' thoughts, and your names will not be on it, by the way. Your ideas and thoughts on it, and some of them are really good. I mean, when I get it all put together, I'll let you guys look at it. But pretty neat on the components that you guys had or the suggestion that you guys had. So let me make sure this thing did time out. Okay. So what is the security policy? I think I talked about how there is one of the big pushes in IT now in companies is they're hiring security analysts for networks. And basically what that is looking at their current infrastructure to develop procedures, to develop guidelines on how an organization can protect its assets. And what are some company assets that you can think of in information technology? What are some informational technology assets that you guys can think of within an organization? Anybody? Huh? Design. What else? What are some assets within an organization that IT has control over?
Hardware itself.
Hardware. Good.
Specialized software.
Good. Anything else? Are we over folks' data, even though we might not, like HR, even though we don't maybe play with it or manage it really, it's on our servers, right? Somewhere, hopefully. We have to secure that, right? And so the data that we're securing how that's secured, what type of document that we have to implement is important. And so an organizational's information security can serve several functions. It can look at an overall intention and direction, risk, how to address them, a security-aware organizational culture. It also ensures that employee behavior is directed and monitored. Now that last one is probably a piece missing with most organizations. The reason it's missing is there's no written documentation on anything, on rules and procedures. Everything's fluid as far as what people do and how people do things. It's just, you've maybe all gotten jobs possibly where you walked in and somebody said, okay, what do I do? And you're like, and they're like, well, just sit down there. Somebody will be there to help you in a little bit. 4 months later, forward fast, you're still sitting there. In fact, this is a true story. A guy got hired at IBM that I know. He got hired probably, what was it, 4 months. It took him 4 months to get him a phone at IBM, and also 4 months to get him access to a program he was supposed to use to do his job. And I said, what'd you do for 4 months? He goes, did some day trading, did some emailing, I answered other people's phones for them. And so, it's not uncommon in a large organization for, procedures just to kind of like, whatever. Especially the larger, I think the worse, the larger the organization is, the more prone it is. So there has to be kind of a balance between trust and control. And what that means basically is you want people to be able to do their job, but you don't want them to be so stringent on security that that job is harder to do, if that makes sense. And so you want to make sure that they have the tools they need. And so there's a careful balance between trust and control. The three approaches is trust everybody all the time, trust no one at any time. We've all worked at those places maybe worked at all three of these. Trust some people some of the time. So decide on what level of control you want, and then is not always clear because security needs of a culture change depending upon really top down. So your CIO, your CIS, CEO, whatever term it is you have for your company, that person or that position determines the culture for security. Okay? There's some folks who really think we should be maybe trust no one at all times. What's the problem with that? Trust no one at any time.
Nobody can get in.
You ever worked at a place like that? I'm talking, I don't care. You've been there 20 years. Wow. Who cares, man? I can get a guy to replace you tomorrow. Right? Unemployment line. It's full every day. I'll just go down and pick somebody. Have you worked in places like that? In IT, believe it or not, that's probably the rule versus the exception when it comes to IT. And the reason for that is control, the word control. We've all worked in places to where maybe some folks have more control than they need. You ever been there before? And so, and there's no checks and balances. And so really a security document in those type of environments will never happen because the person in control doesn't want it. If they want to change a policy on Monday, they're going to change it on Monday. A person that was like that actually was Steve Jobs. He was like that. He basically, the number 2 guy under him that just recently got fired, I don't know if you heard about that, when they did this new Maps release for the iOS and they dropped Google, remember? He was one over that decision where Tim Cook had to come and apologize for, people basically being lost in the city because they didn't have Google Maps. And this guy was asked to sign off on that little document saying, yeah, I agree that we should have, thought this through more. He didn't sign it. So he's gone. And so they did some shifts. The guy from iTunes is now over that position. And that position actually is over all communication when it comes to Apple and new products and R&D. And so, but it wasn't uncommon for Steve to walk in on a Monday and fire half of his programmers because they weren't going quite fast enough. And these guys might have been working on, for Apple for 20 years, 25 years. And so that culture of no trust was definitely in Apple. I think it's changing with Tim Cook a little bit. He's a little different, different breed, different management style. Now, can you get more done in a controlled environment, though? Let me ask you that, I guess, for security purposes. Can things get done faster? Maybe not the best way, but hear me what I'm saying here. Faster, in a more secure way, with no problems, in a totally controlled environment. Think about that for just a second before you answer it. And what I mean by that is you cannot do anything, say anything, move, breathe, unless you have permission. You don't think so? Do you think it is possible for like organizations, or what's a purpose what's a purpose behind organizations controlling people? For productivity, right? To get sales and all that good stuff. So it has been proven, companies have proven, there's been research, it's proven. An example would be, I guess, Hitler. Let's give Hitler as an example, which we all hate Hitler, right? But let's use him as an example and his extreme controlism. Was he able to do things that maybe at that time had never been done before because he literally controlled everybody around him? And what, you can flip it around. Control basically is fear too. People fear their life, fear their job, fear whatever. And so they actually do, when you have fear, what kicks in your body? Do you know? Adrenaline. When you have adrenaline, can you do things you've never been able to do before? Exactly. So what I'm getting at is, in projects, whatever project it is, if you're fearful of losing your job, if you don't get a job done on time, guess what? It's been proven you can do things you didn't think you would ever do before, or nobody's ever done before, because of that adrenaline and that fear that's inside. So programmers literally in Apple would stay up for like weeks at a time and maybe have only 3 or 4 hours sleep, be walking in with Mountain Dew, at the same desk, no shower, for weeks on end. But did they put out good product? Yeah. But what did it take? Total controlism. And so there has to be a balance between that. And so when students always say, well, people don't work well, and they do work well in controlled environment. That's the point. We can do things, I can do things, you can do things. Like if somebody was to bust through the door and try to attack us, you guys could do things that you didn't think you could do before, right? So when adrenaline kicks in, we can do things more than what we thought we could. And so, but there has to be balance on control, on trust. Like the users, they want to be able to get their work done without restrictive security controls. And you can understand IT's perspective on, do they need to listen to music all day long or watch YouTube videos on cats? Do they? Do they have to do that? I mean, do you have to have that to work? And so, some places said, well, we're going to give you 30 minutes. You can go wherever you want to, except for pornography sites. You can go do whatever you want to do for 30 minutes of a day. You have a allotted 30-minute time frame to go wherever you want to go. Do whatever you want to do. That wallet gives employees an hour to do what they want to do. And other companies are following suit. Google does that. Some of these other companies. And also, trying to think here locally, Lions, the PHP firm that's hired a few of our students, they do that. They encourage people to have personal projects that they work on, an hour a day or 30 minutes a day. How would that help in your workplace? What would that do or make you feel like?
Gmail and Google Voice were both personal projects.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, came out, and probably other ones that we could probably look at. But what would that make you feel when you knew that you had 30 minutes or an hour to do whatever you wanted to for your own project or your own personal work? Would that make you more productive? Yeah, definitely, because there's ways to make people productive. Yes, you can be more productive if I'm totally controlling over you. That's true. But people kill themselves, people die, people get sick, people quit, get fired. I mean, all bad stuff happens in that environment. It does work though. I mean, it's been proven it does work, getting stuff done. But you can also, on the flip side, work with people, make them feel valued, make them feel honored, make them feel like their input is wanted and needed. You can also get a lot of productivity out of that as well. Okay. Now, will there be people take advantage of that? Definitely, there will. All right. And I guess that's where there's always going to be people take advantage of an environment like that. And so, but in my mind, in my experience in management, when you as a manager, are willing to help people in everyday work, get their work done, not be a tyrant, but work with them, work with their skills and their expertise. When the time comes up for them to have a project where there's a major deadline and, hey guys, we got to get this done. You know, I'm going to really need your help this next month to get it done. Guess what? They step up. They don't complain about it. Just do it. Okay? And so, but people that work for bosses that are tyrants maybe, or that IT departments that are tyrants, when it comes to projects and procedures, when it comes to getting more work done, they drag their feet. They get done whatever they can get done, but they're not going to put any more work in than they have to. Not going to put any overtime in. Nope, I put my 8 hours in, I'm done. I'm going to go home. And so, system support personnel concerned about the ease of managing systems under tight controls. Management concerned about cost of security protection for attacks that may not materialize. So when you design a security policy, you got a couple things. One is look at some definitions here. The first is a standard. It's basically requirements, a collection of requirements specific to a system procedure that must be met by everybody. Let's talk about we're talking about the password policy you guys did, or the lack of password policy. What are some standards we could have on campus to have a more strict, or not strict, but more standardized selection of requirements for password policy? Guidelines, a collection of suggestions that should be implemented. And then policy is a document that outlines specific requirements or rules that must be met. So if you have these three, people understand it whenever they get hired. They have to read it. Does everybody read it and understand it? No. But it's there for them as a guide, as a standard, and you can always refer back to it. So a policy has these characteristics: communicates a consensus of judgment, it defines appropriate behavior, identifies what tools and procedures are needed. Policies provide directives for human resources actions, and in response to appropriate behavior, like say maybe, I don't know, you have three write-ups before you're fired on going to websites you shouldn't go to, you know, or whatever. Giving somebody your password and you're not supposed to do that. 3 chances. Now, most places only give 2, but policies that may be helpful in an event that's necessary to prosecute violators. See, when you go to court with employees that have been fired or quit and then try to come back and get unemployment, employers can fight unemployment request, because especially if it's been, say, they were fired for stealing, we'll say, okay? Or they were filed for, let's say they were fired for giving their password out to somebody and they weren't supposed to, and they did it 2 times. Check, check, you're fired, okay? If you don't have a policy and procedure in place, the courts will say, well, I don't see any written policy or procedure prior to this event, so they're going to get their unemployment, okay? And so there has to be something in writing in case of unemployment, in case of violations of whatever in the future for the law. You have a cycle as well for security policy. We went over some of these already. This first part, asset identification, threat identification, vulnerability, risk assessment, risk mitigation. And so basically it's looking at all your assets, identifying them, looking at threat agents, how vulnerable are we in our area, what type of assessment, outcome do we have, and then mitigation. The second phase of security policy is to use the information from the risk management study to create the policy. Now that first phase, you can actually have companies come in and do it for you, which I suggest doing, because you're going to be biased in your network and in your job. All of us will be. And so to have somebody come in and do that security policy management study, risk management study, would be helpful. And so you take that security study, that risk management study, and then you create a policy from it. Then final phase is reviewing that policy on a periodic basis for compliance, because things change. Culture changes, programs change, hardware changes, personnel change. So you've got your risk management study, You've got your security policy from that risk management study and a compliance to monitor it. An example of change would be, say you currently have at your job proximity cards to get into doors, okay? We'll say, okay, we've looked at this, we've done a study on it, and they said, here are some weaknesses. We've found employees giving their cards to other employees to let them in. We've found propping the door open so people can just get in when they're late. So there's a couple examples. How can we remedy that? Okay, what are some ways we can remedy that? It could be we make sure that the doors have a spring on them to where it cannot be propped open, even though with them they can still prop it open, we know, but maybe the door doesn't have a spring on it.
Put an alarm on it.
Yeah, put an alarm on it. Maybe some type of system to where if it's not shut within 10 seconds, some beep sound goes off or whatever. There's something you can do to make sure the door's shut every time when people come in. Giving the cards out, putting cameras up at every location that has the proximity cards. Cameras right on the door to where people know that they're monitored. You let them know, hey, these cameras are going up, you're going to be monitored. Be less likely to do it if they know it's on film, okay, for the 10 o'clock news or whatever. And so, be less likely to give that out. But let's say you have that policy in place this year. Next year, you get rid of the proximity cards, and now you go to thumbprint or fingerprint entry or voice recognition or whatever, okay? You're going to have to change your policy because of that, okay? And if you have a new whatever that you've just started and you begin to create a security policy, generally that life cycle for the compliance monitoring needs to be lesser. And so if the normal compliance monitoring is once a year and you implement a new door policy for fingerprint or clocking in fingerprint or whatever, you might have to back that up to say 3 months or 6 months because it's new, and to kind of revisit it. You're going to do some tweaking probably on your policy, especially a new policy. There's things going to happen or questions employees are going to have that are going to come to you that you're going to have to modify that security policy. Does that make sense? And so 3 months maybe instead of once a year if a new item comes into your network. So steps in developing a policy is when designing security policy, many organizations follow a standard of principles. There are softwares out there, by the way, that let you create policies. It's advisable that a design of a security policy should work in a team atmosphere, and bringing in folks from all different departments that work in those areas to come up with a policy. These definitely need to be non-IT people to where they can share their thoughts and concerns and even suggestions on security policy, because these are the folks going to be using it every day. It's advisable that, or the third one is the team should first decide on the scope and goals of the policy. So in this meeting, we're going to come up with a policy on door access, and we need to complete it in 3 months. We're going to come up with a new security policy on door access because now we've switched from proximity cards to, fingerprint authentication. Statements regarding due care are often included. So the obligations are imposed on the owners and operators of the assets to exercise reasonable care of the assets and take necessary precautions to protect them. And so when they have a new item, like say an entry to a door is now changed from proximity to thumbprint or fingerprint, they have to understand this is something that is going to help you be more productive, help you be more secure in your environment. And so what are some ways that we can set up a security policy? So security policy must, and here's an example of some statements, must be implementable and enforceable. Have you ever worked in a place where they try to implement a security policy or any policy? It was impossible to meet. Impossible. Not going to happen. I don't know where you came up with the policy, but not going to be able to do it.
Where it backfires.
Yeah, here's an example. Password policy. You have to change your password every 30 days, but nothing in your password that you're changing, each password change, nothing in your new password can be a part of your old password. Nothing at all. No part of that word can be in there at all. That's a little bit stringent. Do what?
I had one where it was any previous password.
Yeah, any previous password, right. And that's a little much. You know, so you can tweak it down to maybe be, okay, everything up to, say if it has to be a 13-character password. So you can have up to 9 characters of that password be the same in prior passwords, or 10 characters, or whatever. That way they're literally having to change, and you give them examples. The first part of your password is whatever the word is, and then maybe you just change the last 3 numbers every month to something different, or 4 numbers, whatever you want to. So that's something more manageable than any password, any part of the password. Be concise and easy to understand. Balance protection with productivity. And part of the being concise and easy to understand problem is, the reason that's not happening when things are implemented is they're not doing what we're doing now, which is talking about the policy, and somebody says, well, you mean I can't, or you may give me an example of how I can create a different password every month. And then the person in charge goes, well, what do you mean? You just do it. Well, can you give me some examples? No. And so as you start discussing it, they realize, oh, maybe that is a little too difficult to do. And so by discussing it in a large group of people, you're going to find those things out. Okay? Balance protection with productivity. And then the policy should state reasons why the policy is necessary. The reason we're having to change your password every 30 days is to save the company's data and your data from being breached, or from somebody hacking in and finding your password, or your password getting out somehow. And so if it's changed every month, or every 60 days, or every 90 days, it'll save your data. Describe what is covered by the policy. With the password policy, it's going to cover, okay, in detail, here's going to be how we're going to implement the password policy information. You'll be prompted every 30 days to change your password. Here's the rules for that password. Here's some examples of how to find a new password. And then outline how the violations would be handled. Okay? Violations for passwords would be what? What are some violations people could do with passwords?
Write them down.
Yeah, write them down on a piece of paper, put them on a keyboard, giving them to the, I've known administrators literally give their password to everybody in the department. Who cares, man? What's the worst that can happen? You know what I mean? So you have those at total control, and those like, who cares? Let everybody have the password. But they're a new employee that you just started. Who cares? I already told you, give it to them. All right? And so those type of things can definitely, Java, I don't want Java. Java's always popping up all the time. Designing the policy, follow these guidelines, notify the users in advance. How many's walked in on Monday and a new policy is taking place? You're like, when did we hear about this? Oh, we've been meeting in the room 205 for the last 6 months. Who's been meeting? Oh, let's see, myself and another person. Okay, what about everybody else? We didn't know anything about it. Oh, well, it's done. It's already in there. So here's what you guys need to do. I mean, you talk about blow up. You talk about people just freaking out. Do not do that. Give people notification in advance. And if you've had that group meeting going on for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, there's not going to be any hidden agenda there. Then provide a sample of people affected by the policy with the opportunity to review and comment on the policy. So before it's ever released to the public, you're going to have a beta stage of some type, where people get to have feedback. And so you don't want it totally published and released prior to some type of beta stage where people give, say an example would be on the password. Well, every once in a while we hire temp help. What about them? Oh, we didn't think about that. Well, that's something you got to think about. And so if we didn't invite people from HR that would give us that information or that thought, we wouldn't know that. Prior to deployment, give all users at least 2 weeks to review and comment. I like to give about a month, if possible, on any new whatever. It doesn't matter. At least a month for the population in general to know what's coming up. Here's what's going to happen. Here's the thought. Because the good thing with a month is let's say you give them a month, and it's November 1st, say December 1st is going to be released. Say a week prior, something happens that you didn't foresee, which happens in projects. if you've given that month time frame, you basically have a whole month to play with it and to debug it and to work out all the kinks. And if you need to push a date back even further, you have to push a date back even further, right? You want to release it in a proper way. You want to release it correctly. Because the one thing you don't want to do is release something prior to all these kinks being worked out. And then that's going to cause low productivity. It's going to cause people to get frustrated and cuss you out. And it's going to cause people, maybe even cost your job, possibly. And so I've always erred on the side of padding dates even further. So if somebody says, if we think of an IT group in a project, oh, this is going to take, Iris says, it's going to take 2 weeks to implement this, I think. I'm going to say, okay, let's double that. Let's say a month. Because there's always stuff that comes up, whether new projects, whether emergency things that come up that you've got to fix. It might take 2 or 3 days out of your equation, especially with smaller IT departments, because if you only have half a dozen people working, if you have a large project that comes in that the CEO wants implemented week 2, that's going to take a week, there you go. You've lost a whole week of productivity and working on this new procedure. So allow users the authority to carry out the responsibility in a given policy, and that's an important one as well. You don't want to tell people, you don't want to give somebody a new policy that disables them from performing their job as they performed it before. Okay? You don't want to limit them in any form or fashion, because that's going to basically destroy the policy. The whole purpose of security policy is to make things more productive. It's not going to really make things easier. I'm not going to say security policies make things easier. They generally don't. It's generally more steps people have to do. But if people understand why we're doing it, hey, I want you involved, I want your feedback. At the end of the day, at the end of that 6-month period, they're willing to take the extra step or two. But where people aren't willing to take the extra step or two is where it's thrown at them on a weekend decision to do something. So from a Friday to Sunday, somebody decided to do it, and it's rolled out on Monday. That's where people are not, they're like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And then you get the call from the CEO or whoever says, we're reversing this. What do you mean? It's already implemented. No, it's not. We're reversing it. By the end of the day, it's going to be reversed. And that's happened too to people. It's happened to me when I first started out. And it'll happen to you if you don't give people time to implement a policy. Does that make sense? And so by inviting all the folks in that are the players of the game, it'll help you out. Now, the policy you're wanting to implement, if you don't involve people, could be a good policy. It could be a great policy. And it'll be a secure policy. But if you don't implement it the right way, and doing it the right way always takes longer than you think, okay? So if you think something's going to take a month, it might take 2 months or 3 months for that thing to finally roll out. And it might be totally different than what you thought it was going to be at the end. You're not going to get 100% of what you want probably, but that's okay. You want to compromise and basically you want to give people, even though they maybe not changing the policy, you want to make them think that they're changing the policy, all right, by giving them input. Because seriously, people just want to be heard. If you give them a 10-minute time frame in a meeting to say, here's your thought, here's my complaints on what we're doing. They give 10 minutes of their time to give a presentation of what it is that they don't like about it. At the end of that 10 minutes, you all look at it as a group and decide, I understand where you're coming from, but at this time, we're not going to be able to do that. Okay, but they feel good that they got to share their 10 minutes of this. I just want you guys to know this is why I don't agree with this. Does that make sense? Because that's the main thing is people in all departments want to be heard, and it's up to IT to kind of make sure that happens. And that's sometimes we don't do a good job at that. And so by letting people get heard, it's going to help you in the long run. So types of security policy becomes an umbrella for all sub-policies included in it. So your main password policy could then become an umbrella for a whole bunch of other policies underneath it. So you have different policies here. I'll read to you. You've got acceptable encryption policy, antivirus policy, This has to do with establishing guidelines for effectively reducing the threat of computer viruses in an organization. Database credentials and coding policy defines requirements for storing and retrieving database username and passwords. Email policy, standards for using corporate email. That's a good one. How should we email each other? How should we address each other in emails? How should we reply to each other? Should we do a reply all? What is reply all? What's the purpose of reply all? The CC and BCC scenario, what's that all about? What does that mean? Is that important when you're emailing somebody and you CC their boss in that email? Is that a big thing? Yeah, that's a big thing. What you're telling that person is, in that correspondence, I want you to do this, but I really don't trust you're going to do it, so I'm going to CC your boss in the process to make sure it gets done, right? And so there's email etiquette, I guess is the term that's used on, do people have that?
Use BCC though, and never know.
Yeah, and BCC, they never know, unless they do a reply all, I think then they see the BCCs, don't they? Or do they do not? They don't, sweet. All right, talking about reply all, did you guys, there was a guy, I think it was over the weekend, they did one of these Nightline things or something over the weekend where they're brainstorming. It's a big project, right? It was an ad for Super Bowl. This guy's in a marketing firm. Hey guys, you come up with this great idea. And so they just started shooting stuff back and forth on email, And when you're thinking of ideas, sometimes you maybe will say things that maybe is kind of off color a little bit. Well, this guy thought he was emailing just one person in the group, and he emailed all, and he was talking about all these other people in the group and making fun of them. And one of them was like the CEO or something of the group. Anyway, he replied all and said this derogative statement about these people and just slamming this one, slamming that one. Anyway, make a long story short, he didn't realize till after he sent that reply all that he had hit reply all and sent it, because the person on the other end he was talking to emailed back just to him, said, "Did you know you just hit reply all on that?" And he goes, "No!" And so anyway, make a long story short, he thought for sure, he was going to get fired over it. But it ended up being that very premise of what he did became the concept for the commercial. It was a commercial during the Super Bowl where a guy did a reply all to everybody in the company, and the whole commercial was about him trying to go through in the server room and pull all the wires out and try to get all this stuff to where everybody got the email. And it was a genius concept at the end, but it came from a stupid mistake at the beginning. And so reply all, email etiquette, definitely people need to know about. Email retention policy, how long do we keep our email? I believe here on campus, we're supposed to keep it up to 7 years. I don't know if we do that anymore. Illinois, in general, Illinois law says keep it at 7 years just for legal purposes. And that's another thing. Everything that you email at work is public record, meaning for that company to use anywhere they want to, in any court or whatever. So be careful what you write in an email. It's permanent. It's a permanent data string of your life, all right? Same thing with Facebook, same thing with Twitter. Because people, I've had students say, well, hey, it's on Facebook, it's my account. Are you serious? It's like a billboard on the street. Okay? Yeah, but it's mine, right? No, it's on Facebook. If you read their agreement, when you sign up for Facebook, what you say on Facebook, they can literally use whatever you say on Facebook for whatever advertisement they want to.
It's like the pig on the farm saying, "This is mine."
Exactly. Well, I can post whatever I want to about anybody, right? Yeah, I guess. But will it come back and bite you in the end? Probably so. I mean, we've heard stories of students graduate Harvard, top of their class, come to get a big law firm, the 4.0 accolades, letters of recommendation, and they found this Facebook page of this girl partying with Jack Daniels in her hand and the disco ball, and she doesn't get the job. And so it is important that you watch all your P's and Q's when it comes to communication. And a lot of people don't know that. And that it is public record. Extranet policy defines requirements of third-party organization, access to your organizational networks. Information-sensitive policy, establishing criteria for classifying and securing your organization's information in a manner appropriate to its level of security. Router security policy outlines standards for minimal security configuration for routers and switches. And a wireless communication policy defines standards for wireless systems used to connect to your organizational network. So that's just a few, and we'll end on this one. Here's some policies you guys have heard of, and I want to ask you if there's some maybe that's not on this list that you've had to play with here recently in your workplace, maybe a new one that you've had to deal with. Acceptable use policy, we have that all over campus on all the computers. Nobody reads it, but it's that little pop-up that comes up that has about 2 or 3 paragraphs about how you're supposed to use the computers here on campus for educational purposes. Do what? You've read? Okay, thank you. Okay. Security-related human resources. Those are things like, for instance, your social security address, anything about your person, a policy about that. Should your address be publicly put out on the public role for everybody to see in your business? That's something for you to decide. And give people rights to do it or not to do. Let them have it. Like here on campus, I can put a little check mark on my directory to say, yeah, I don't mind if people see my address or my phone number, but if I can also say, no, I don't want anybody to see it. And I can also put on, I don't want anybody to see a picture or whatever. You know, you can limit everything basically on there. Password management and complexity. You know, how short your password, how long, how many characters, capital letters, you know, the whole spiel on password policy. Personally identifiable information policy. This one could be, you know, how do you identify employees on your place of business? If they're, especially if you have a large organization, it's really important. Do they wear badges? Do they have to wear badges? A lapel with a badge? What's your policy on that? Disposal and destruction of things like hard drives, paper. How do we shred paper? Where do we shred paper? Do we shred paper? Service level agreements. Service level agreements would have to do with maintenance, the mats on the floor, cleaning, lights, lawn, snow removal, whatever, construction. Classification of information. Everything that's in your organization, is it going to have a class, different type of class applied to that? So say, you know, it might be, you know, this is personal information, this is corporate information, this is company information, you know, whatever, department information. Change management. This one is important in a lot of places, meaning if you are a manager of a department and you switch to another department or quit and go to another job, what procedures are in place to replace that person immediately? So that'd be a change management policy. Who is going to replace that person immediately? There's got to be somebody to fill that void and that vacuum quickly. And so that has to be a change management policy. And then ethics. In the state of Illinois, I know all the public employees like myself have to take an ethics training online every year and update it and take a little quiz at the end of it. A lot of companies are doing this as well just to save, they can save money on insurance, I know, by doing this, because they can say, yeah, all of our employees are required to take ethics training or maybe sexual harassment training or whatever the case may be, and they get discounts on insurance if the employees take that training, that verification that they took a training. Because if they have knowledge of what to do correctly in ethics and what to do correctly when it comes to dealing with coworkers to lessen the opportunity for sexual harassment lawsuits, then they can prove that all employees have taken this type of training and test. They're going to save money in the end with insurance companies. So that's just some examples of security policies. Anybody had anyone recently at your workplace that you've had to deal with, a new one maybe, or maybe in the last year or two, that's been a change in a security policy or a brand new security policy you want to share? Anybody? Or has it pretty much been the same? No changes. Okay, let me ask you this then. Any challenges you've had in any job you've had with a security policy implementation that you just thought was really crazy? Yeah.
UPS was notorious for, here's a new policy, run with it.
Yeah.
And it was implemented that night.
That's it.
You had
Done.
literally the end of the week to get everybody converted. After that, there was
Right.
consequences, which was always our greatest thing.
Right, right.
Consequence.
Right, exactly. And was there follow through on that, on the contract? Never. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. Anybody else on implementation in the past of any company you've worked at of maybe let's talk about a good way. Was there a company you've worked at that's implemented things positively. You know, they did a good job at doing it. Anybody have a story like that? Or is these all horror stories? Can we have one more horror story of implementation? It could be a password, it could be a new program coming in on Monday that everybody has to use. It replaces an old program, whatever the case may be. A software program. Anybody have a story like that? You have? No? Because that's notorious too. Companies will do that. They'll have an old application, right, they've used for years. They come in on Monday, brand new application. How do we use it? There's a manual on your desk. We put it on everybody's desk Sunday night. What are you talking about? Read it.
Is that like the new data tell they're doing?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Are they doing it that way?
Going from a hard program.
Oh, I did hear about that.
to a
Diane was telling me
web-based
about that.
one, and it's in the newsletter that came out today that it's at a certain date. I thought it was December 1st. There's no longer going to be able to use the hard copy. You have to do everything web-based for
Didn't
data
you read
tell.
the manual they sent us a month ago?
No, I didn't read the
PDF
manual.
document? Oh, you should've.
I don't have access to that.
Oh, well.
Why would I read the policy? Yeah.
You don't read it, not my problem. I sent it to you, right? And so security policies can be implemented the right way and the wrong way. I want to just leave you with this tonight. It's going to take longer, number one. You're not going to get everything you want initially, number two, out of that policy. You're going to have to compromise. And this is just some things I've learned over the years. Number three, don't be rash in your implementation of new policies. When I was a new IT administrator, I was like a bulldog in a china closet. Everything was changing now. I don't care what it was like the 20 years prior, it's changing now. People don't like you when you do that. You make enemies very quickly. Regardless how nice you are afterwards, you never remedy yourself from that. And so, just word of warning, if you get a new job, a new position where you're in any authority to make change, take a year at least, or maybe 6 months minimum, before you implement any major policy change. Okay, what you want to do is get your feet wet, get the meetings going, and it will take longer doing it that way. Not to say you can't bulldog it through, because I've done that before, and it's implemented and it works and it's right. It's a right policy, but implemented in the wrong way. Does that make sense? And so you want to make sure and take your time, get the people together that's going to affect it, let them come up with help you come up with that policy procedure, and it will morph from your original thought, but that's okay. At the end of the day, you'll get that policy implemented, and you'll still have your toes left on your feet, okay? You'll still be able to walk to work, all right? And not look behind your back on the way out of work into your car, okay? All right? So, any questions? So Thursday we're going to be doing the lab on the drive look. Next week is not a week, this is week 13 now. Week 14 is next week, but it's not the beginning of your presentations. We will do the ESIS lab next Thursday, or not next Thursday, next Tuesday. We'll do that Tuesday. The ESIS lab next Tuesday. And so we'll do that together. That'll be fun. All right, and then next Thursday is Thanksgiving. Anybody traveling for Thanksgiving? Or everybody staying home? Where are we traveling to?
Traveling to Gary, Indiana, but I'll
Gary,
be back.
Gary, Indiana. Anybody else traveling for Thanksgiving? Staying home? All right. Well, see everybody Thursday. If you have any questions or you want to come up and play with the new Mini that has 8 on it, welcome yourself to come up and do it. I'm going to leave it up here on the end of the table, and you can play with it all you want to.